David Hundeyin, an investigative journalist, you all know him. He's accusing Aisha Yu of being part of those that were allegedly sponsored by the US government led by Barack Obama to carry out a campaign of calumny against Goodluck Ebele Jonathan prior to the 2015 general election. To understand what David Hundeyin is saying against Aisha Yu, I want you to listen to this interview that was done by Goodluck Ebele Jonathan after he lost the 2015 general election. I'll be back.
The level of interference by the Obama's government was very overwhelming. It's not as if I couldn't have won the election even with that. But if by my own thinking and also the way some other people looked at it, they go outside the normal diplomatic relationship, then it should be mentioned. Sending that person to Nigeria at the eve of election, after Obama even issued a statement directing Nigerians to vote for the next chapter, that tells us something. And we should not sweep this under the carpet. If a foreign country, whether African country or even America or any other country, interferes with our own elections, we should mention it. Immediately the Chibok issue came up, we expect Nigerians to be concerned. How do we get these girls out? Within a couple of days, we saw people going to the US would bring back our girls' placards. How? Why? And of course, the Mrs. Obama received one of those placards. I cannot take responsibility for the abduction. I don't control Boko Haram. They are criminals. But as a president, of course, you know, it's not the president that go to the fields. You have security and intelligence officers that do the work. Let me admit that, yes, maybe they do their best, but their best was not good enough for us to recover the girls. That does not mean that I'm trying to remove myself from any blame. Yes, I may not be blamed for the action, but I could be blamed that my security and intelligence system were not strong enough to be able to rescue the girls.
This was an interview of Goodluck Ebele Jonathan after he was ousted out of office by power mongers, power desperados, and ignorant and gullible Nigerians. In this interview, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan openly revealed the huge interference of the Barack Obama-led government in the 2015 general election. To many Nigerians, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan was defeated, or let's say rigged out of office, by APC-led government of President Muhammadu Buhari. But the reality is that there was a strong foreign machinery being backed by the US government of Barack Obama to see Jonathan out of office. So many persons have given many reasons why the US government wanted Jonathan out of office. To some, it was because he refused to sign into law the gay right. To others, it was a deliberate attempt to sabotage Nigeria's economy that was rated the third fastest growing economy in the world. You may be asking, at what point is Aisha Yu being responsible for what happened to Goodluck Ebele Jonathan? And this is where Aisha Yu came into play. Beginning of February, President Donald Trump, with support from Elon Musk, head of the Department of Government Efficiency (DOGE), initiated action to dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development (USAID). The USAID was established in 1961. It has been a cornerstone of U.S. foreign assistance, managing approximately $44 billion in aid programs across more than 100 countries. USAID is present in Nigeria. I can remember vividly when the investigative journalist 99 Oprez accused them of supplying arms to Boko Haram insurgents in Borno State. Following the dismantling of USAID, investigative journalist David Hundeyin quickly ran a background check about their activities in Nigeria. A lot were uncovered. I will play you videos of the FBI, the CIA, exposing how some US presidents have used the USAID to cause regime change in some countries. But first, take a look at some of the screenshots I got from David Hundeyin official Twitter account. all David Hundeyin is saying is that the USAID was allegedly used to sponsor a campaign of calumny against Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, of which Aisha Yu was part of it. Prior to the 2015 general election, there was an alleged kidnapping of Chibok girls by Boko Haram insurgents. Like Jonathan said in that interview, the story immediately made its way to the international community, and you could see Obama's wife Michelle Obama holding a placard demanding the release of the Chibok girls. You can see Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was then in APC. You can see Atiku Abubakar and so many other persons. They lash onto that story. They use it to campaign against Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. That protest really dealt a lot of blow to Goodluck Ebele Jonathan administration.
My name is Aisha Yu. I'm a member of the Bring Back Our Girls group. I'm the coordinator of the daily sit-out and a member of the strategic team of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. For the past 1 year, what has given me the most impression and what has moved me the most has been sacrifice from people. It's a group that has been able to unite people based on their humanity, on their empathy. It's not about what you have or you don't have. We have the young, even across age. In the past, we faced a lot of harassment and a lot of intimidation. Basically, when we started our movement, we gave our mandate to the government, and it is from the government that we request for them to go out there and rescue our girls. And of course, a few days after that, a group came out that called themselves Release Our Girls. Their own cry was to the terrorists, telling them to release the girls. And it was this group that came on to attack us. And what was very disturbing was the fact that while we were being attacked, men of the Nigerian police force stood by and watched. Right now, the climate is changing a little bit. The police are more, they are friendlier, they are supportive. Even when we did our 1 year commemorative activities, when we are demanding from the government, we are simply behaving as responsible citizens. That's what responsible citizens should do. When the government is failing at something, we ought to let.
The story of that kidnap make everything look staged. The girls were kidnapped in Borno State under the supervision of the then governor Kashim Shettima, who was warned by the then Minister of Education Nyesom Wike to close down the school and evacuate the students to a safer place. That warning was ignored. Kashim Shettima is now the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. David Hundeyin is saying that protest was being sponsored by USAID to make Jonathan administration look bad, and Aisha Yu was part of those being used to frustrate Jonathan out of office. Aisha Yu has denied the allegation. She is actually saying that she has every right to protest against Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. She gave a reason that the economy was bad, that Jonathan was arresting journalists, that there was insecurity and dollar was high. She has every right to protest against Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. And my important question to her is, everything is worse under President Muhammadu Buhari and Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Has she, Aisha Yu, carry out any protest against this president? No. Let me leave you with the remaining videos of the FBI and the CIA revealing the activities of USAID in other countries. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Everyone can look this up if you're listening right now. In 2021, the U.S. Special Forces Perspective, under Mark Milley, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, put out an entire instruction manual for how the U.S. military can work with the State Department and our intelligence services to organize a rent-a riot, to destabilize a country in order to bring them to the negotiating table. They gave an example of a hypothetical West African country where a member of U.S. Special Forces is on a separate mission, driving down a highway, and notices a billboard for Chinese infrastructure investment into a new port in this Western African country. The unit takes note of this billboard on a highway in Western Africa with Chinese symbols on it. They do their own investigation and figure out that this is part of a real estate development project from Chinese investors, that as part of that development project will have the construction of a Chinese naval port in this West African country, where in theory China would then be able to project naval influence in the Atlantic Ocean. What the Special Forces Guide calls for is coordination with the State Department, coordination with our intelligence services, coordination with our psychological operations unit to take all of our assets in that West African region. And in that case, what they did is they planned to work with the unions. What they did is they embarked in a social media influence campaign. They would activate all their media assets, all of their civil society institutional assets, and all of their union assets to have the union labor pool in that West African country. Well, actually, there was one thing that happened first, is they first then went, in this hypothetical, the State Department sent a delegation to persuade the West African country to forbid the development license to the Chinese developer. And the head of that West African government said no. Because something was happening in the hypothetical in the next 30 days, there was a time sensitivity to generate an instability event to stop this using time-sensitive emergency. And so the way they generated that was they worked with their union contacts in the region and the media contacts in the region and created this whole social media campaign to inflame the sentiments of the West African labor union workforce who were working for Chinese companies at the time. Because in this hypothetical, the Chinese mining firms and Chinese industry, was employing a lot of these Africans. And it was to destabilize the country, to bring the mines, to bring the factories, to bring all of the Chinese production in the region to a halt, and to put all these Africans out of jobs, and to bring the African government effectively to a standstill. At the same time, in their own Special Forces manual, it called for support from USAID to provide these same striking miners alternative jobs, so that while they were striking from the Chinese labor companies, they were still getting paid by U.S. taxpayers. So they were financially bribed effectively to boycott Chinese industry and to devastate their own country's government, create this crisis, and then use the State Department delegation to go back to the negotiating table with the West African government and promised to end the destabilization if the development was halted. And in that hypothetical, the West African government then rejects the license for the real estate development of China, and that is declared as an unalloyed success by the U.S. Special Forces and their partner network in the State Department and Intelligence. And this is the way of our diplomacy in 2021. And this is all publicly available if you look at the Special Forces prospectus. And when this goes live, I'll post this on my X account at Mike Ben Cyber so that you can, don't take my word for it. But this is how we operate. And so I see what we're doing with these missile attacks and with these calls for our 12 CIA bases on the Russian border to be able to do long-range precision-guided strikes into Russia as maybe setting off World War III, but it may also be part of a destabilization threat that gives Russia a reason to give the territories back to Ukraine in order to stop the blood from its own main arteries. We have this foreign policy establishment that manages the American empire that saw internet censorship as kind of an El Dorado key to permanently winning the soft power influence game around the world. And what I mean by that is, okay, so you know how a lot of people talk about the early CIA activity in the media with things like Operation Mockingbird and whatnot, and the ability to sort of propagandize things in the media. Well, you never had this capacity in the 1950s while that was going on. If you and I were at dinner, Thanksgiving or something, and there's 12 people at the table, and I start talking to you about, I don't know, the COVID vaccines may have adverse side effects. There was never an ability to simply reach under the table as an intelligence agency or as the Department of Homeland Security or as the Pentagon or the State Department and just turn off the volume when we talk to each other peer to peer. But since the lion's share of all communication is digital, especially the politically impactful ones, that capacity now allows our blob, our foreign policy establishment, to effectively control every election, or at least tilt every election around the world. And they've sprawled this into 140 countries. And Trump is going to run into every single regional desk at the State Department, every single equity at the Pentagon, arguing that if you do not allow us to continue this censorship work, it will undermine national security because it will allow Russian favored narratives to win the day in the Ivory Coast, in Chad, in Niger, and Brazil, and Venezuela, and Central and Eastern Europe. You're going to have the State Department argue that if we don't have this counter misinformation capacity, then extremists will win elections around the world, or populists will win the election around the world, and that will undermine the power of our democratic institutions, essentially our programming, our assets in the region. And they've built this enormous capacity. We use it because it works, because it wins. And the fact is Trump probably only won this election because, for the same reason, he probably only won the 2016 election, which was, in both cases, there was largely a free internet. It was when Trump got censored into oblivion in 2020 by the U.S. government under his nose, working with webs of outside NGOs and Pentagon front groups to mass censor virtually every narrative that he was putting out, that he lost. So it does work to win elections, and there's a regional desk at the State Department covering every country on earth. Victoria Nuland, had a desk that covered about 20 countries. So every country, the State Department is a preferred winner of that election. We work with all political parties. And that's a hugely powerful tool to lose. It's just twisted and evil, and it needs to. And we need to win. I don't want to say fair fights, but dipping into this sort of dark sorcery power has, not only does it crush the First Amendment entirely, but the diplomatic blowback is just absolutely enormous. I can go through examples of that if you're interested.